Welcome back to Fox 9 All Day Live. Rob Wilson in for Amy Hockert. A bill making its way now through the Wisconsin State House would give law enforcement more tools to test drivers suspected of driving under the influence of drugs. Of course, this has become a big question mark for states in which you're seeing the legalization of marijuana, and law enforcement wants to find ways to do testing for that just as they would for driving under the influence of alcohol. The new bill would allow for field saliva tests to see if drivers have been using illegal drugs or even misusing prescription medicine. Fox 9's Tim Blotz talked with the bill's author about its goals and its potential legal issues.
We're joined by Senator Jesse James, a Republican out of Thorp, Wisconsin, to talk about a new piece of legislation that he's introduced in the Wisconsin State Senate to amend the state's operating while intoxicated law. So, Senator, thanks for joining us to talk about this. This bill really aims to step up law enforcement for drug-impaired driving. Tell us how it works.
Yeah, so what this does is when a law enforcement officer like myself, being the only active law enforcement officer in our Wisconsin State Legislature, this is going to be another tool for us as law enforcement to have at our disposal. So when we have reasonable suspicion to believe that somebody may be operating while intoxicated, that may not necessarily always be the case. They may not be intoxicated. And what we're seeing more of is more operating under the influence of drugs, or OUID is what we call it in Wisconsin. And this legislative piece that we've introduced allows a presumptive test of a subject's oral fluids to determine if they do have an illicit substance or a narcotic or THC. I mean, there's different tests: THC, methamphetamines, amphetamines, benzodiazepines, opioids, fentanyl. So it'll indicate whether there's a positive or a negative presence of those illicit substances.
Senator, the bill is specifically written with the wording oral fluids. Essentially, you're talking about spit, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. It's no different than with the PBT when people are blowing into that tube for a breath test. It's actually capturing the breath in the oral fluids through that. That's why most of the time in the tests, I will have the subject remove the tube and tell them, put it in your pocket, save it. Sometimes I'll say this is a memento of our contact together. The same thing would apply with the oral fluids test, and that is strictly saliva.
How would the saliva collection or spit collection actually work?
So, very good question. It's no different than like a DNA collection swab. You're swabbing the individual's mouth, and you enter the swab into the device, and then it goes through a series of tests, and then it'll give you a positive or negative indicator of a presence being or a substance being present.
So this is different than the saliva testing a lot of us did during the pandemic for COVID, where we would actually have to spit into a test tube-like vessel and have to contribute a lot of spit to get a positive or negative test. What you're saying is this is different. It's a cheek swab.
It's, under the tongue, cheek swab. It goes into the cartridge. The cartridge is inserted then into the testing device. And again, that will indicate whether there's a positive or a negative substance present.
Now, again, would the officer on the scene get an instant reading or in a timely manner? So it doesn't have to be sent to a lab for a positive or negative reading?
Correct. It's a matter of minutes. It is a little bit longer than the preliminary breath test, but this is where the impact that it's going to have, because for me, I serve in a rural area of Chippewa County, and we don't always have the drug recognition experts available to us to come if we believe that a person is operating under the influence, but it's beyond an intoxicating alcohol substance. We think they may be drugged, and that's what we're seeing more of. A lot of people are driving under the influence of THC, marijuana, and that is still a crime, regardless if marijuana is legal or not. So that's something that we've seen an increase, as well as prescription pill abuse. there's a lot of that going on as well, that we see out on the road. So they can operate while under the influence, but we don't always get that smell or odor of an intoxicant. We don't get the red, glossy, bloodshot eyes. We might have a slurred speech. And the tests, our field sobriety tests, standardized field sobriety tests, would also indicate whether they're under the influence. But we take the totality of the circumstances involved with the whole stop as to what is the reason for the stop. Were they deviating in their lane of traffic? Were they crossing the fog line, the center line? Were they, a speeding offense, speeding and then slowing down, speeding again? There's a lot of factors that we take into the consideration of whether or not we do move forward with a standardized field sobriety test onto a preliminary breath test. They can voluntarily submit to a PBT. The same thing would be applicable here with the oral swabs. It would be a voluntary test that is not admissible in court. We just use it as a piece of evidence to indicate whether they may be under the influence of an illicit substance.
Let me lean into your law enforcement experience if I can. First of all, where do you serve?
In the village of Cadott in Chippewa County, home of what's formerly known as Rockfest and Country Fest.
Exactly, right? So in your experience as a law enforcement officer, do you have any documentation, or if you don't, can you reveal anecdotally of those that you pull over for impaired driving, how many of them may be tied to drug use and not alcohol?
So that's interesting, because in our state, most of the time, there will be a mixture of the substances. And with the threshold being at 0.08 in our state, that once they hit 0.08 and we send the evidence collected of the blood collected, once we get a search warrant or voluntary consent, we get a sample of their blood. And once the threshold is met for alcohol, 0.08 or higher, they do not do any further tests. So we don't know if there is the presence. There has been some studies that have indicated the presence of other illicit substances, but most of the time we'll find it on the traffic stop where there'll be marijuana. We could smell marijuana coming from the vehicle, but if they're intoxicated and they blow 0.08 or higher, and then we take them to the hospital, we don't know how much THC. We know that it may be present, and that's why we'll check both boxes to say we want an alcohol and drug test, because maybe they're operating underneath the alcohol of 0.08 or less. Then we would continue on with the drug test. So those numbers, that data is really not available because of our low 0.08 threshold.
Senator, tell me what your concerns are, not just as a state senator, but as a law enforcement officer, as THC products become more ubiquitous. I mean, we see them in drinks that you can buy at gas stations and everywhere. Cannabis is not legal in Wisconsin yet, but it is in Minnesota, and many dispensaries are going to start opening here within the next 6 months or so. What's your concern about those who may be driving more under the influence of THC?
Well, and that is a huge concern, because there is obviously the safety risks within our communities, but also the non-regulation of Delta 8 and hydro THC 11 in our state. We're seeing more cases where they may be operating under the influence of those chemicals, but it's creating some controversy in case law because we have it as Delta 9, and we're trying to get regulation in our state for the other substances. This is a bigger issue than what people realize. And for those that choose to smoke marijuana, all I ask is just don't drive. It's the same thing as if you're intoxicated, don't drive. We have Ubers, we have Lyfts, we have other taxi cab companies. The Tavern League has the Safe Ride program. So use those instead of driving under the influence. It's going to be an issue that we're going to continue to look at. Hopefully we can capture some data, but to my knowledge, we don't have the THC violations documented as far as the combination of alcohol and THC. So that is part of the issue. I think there is a study that's out there regarding how much there was a sample, like 1,000-person sample study done with THC and alcohol. And I think there's like a 70% or a little bit over 70% to where there was a mixture of alcohol and THC in the sample that was provided. So that obviously raises red flags for me as a law enforcement officer.
Senator, I understand your bill has been amended to actually make it a little bit stronger, and this would expand it from not just driving a motor vehicle, but also a motorcycle that's not on the road, or an ATV, or a motorboat as well. Is that correct?
Yes, it was amended to include the ATVs, UTVs, off-highway motorcycles, boats, and snowmobiles. So we have a huge recreation in our state, and those that choose to drive under the influence, I guess it doesn't matter if it's alcohol or an illicit substance. We want to make sure that we're keeping our trails and lakes safe as well.
And give us a progress report. Where does this now stand in the Wisconsin legislature?
It actually has passed the Senate and the Assembly. It's heading to the governors for signing, and all indicators are saying that Governor Tony Evers is going to sign it.
Senator, if Governor Evers signs this into law, what's the rollout look like? Would there be a test period, perhaps, with the Wisconsin State Patrol first to test the technology and then roll it out to sheriff's departments and local police? How is that going to work?
So what I'm hearing is there's a possibility of some federal grant dollars coming through the pipeline. We'll have to take a look at that. It'll probably be a slower rollout. It may be a year or 2 years. I would potentially look at, pending election, since we're in a campaign year, if I return next year going into budget, I would definitely entertain a pilot program and trying to get these devices into our agencies if the federal government doesn't have the action, or we do both. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, it's for the safety of our citizens operating in every element of roads, highways, trails, lakes, it doesn't matter. So I would definitely entertain that going through the next budget process, whether it's like a $1 or $2 million, $3 million grant for these devices for agencies that wish to obtain them, do a pilot, and let's see how this works.
After the governor signs this, if he does, what's your hopes?
My hopes are that this would help if our people are choosing to drive under the influence of any kind of illicit substance besides alcohol, wine, liquor, those mixed drinks, that this would be a deterrent, and hopefully we can get some prevention education out there to our community saying, hey, this stuff is out here now, and we need to keep our roads and our community safe because there's just too much devastation caused by those that choose to drive under the influence.
Senator Jesse James, Republican from Thorp, Wisconsin. Thank you so much for your time here today to talk about Senate Bill 678. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.